But I also think he obviously has a responsibility to Kenya, to the democratic process, to the rule of law, to make certain that he is providing the evidence and going through the legitimate judicial process that is there for examining any kind of concerns that anybody has. Every observer group is asking for all of the leaders to be responsible, to allow the process to work out, and to put to test the system that has been put in place where transparently and accountably to everybody, in the full light of day, people will be able to see what happened on a particular ballot in a particular balloting location and examine whether or not the process was properly followed.
We are hearing of some protests yesterday. 2 people have been killed so far. Are you concerned about this violence?
Well, all violence is unacceptable. And of course, anybody is concerned. Anybody in their right mind is concerned about the potential of violence getting in the way of the legitimacy of this process. This is not an electronic vote, ultimately. It's a paper ballot vote. And so it is determinable as to what happened. And I think it is important for all of the candidates to allow the process to be transparently put to the test. And then if they have a concern, go through the rule of law, go to the court process, and let the evidence be there for everybody to see. I think there is great legitimacy in the basic process. The question now that has to be tested is, did everybody follow it? And has it, in fact, has somebody attempted to alter it at any stage? But the important thing for people to know, for every Kenyan to know, this is their election. It's their individual votes that they waited in line for hours to cast. And we believe, the Carter Center believes, and the other observers believe, that we can determine whether or not those votes were properly cast, properly counted, properly transmitted, and whether or not the integrity of this election has been protected. And that is what is critical to every Kenyan and everybody who cares about democracy.
My Lords, from that interview, my Lords would have observed that Mr. Kerry was in the company of over 400 international observers. It was their observation that the vote, the integrity of the vote was protected, and that is a constitutional requirement, protect the integrity of the vote. My Lords, agents were present. Agents agreed to the tally at the polling stations. The percentage of the agents has been tabulated or indicated in the e-log report is over 90%. And very important, my Lords, if there is any problem with transmission of the Form 34A, one simply goes back to the manual 34A, because as our Court of Appeal said, it is the primary document. So we shouldn't have a contest on transmission. We should have a contest, if any, on the numbers in 34A, because those numbers can only speak one voice. You cannot therefore found a presidential petition, engage the apex court on questions of transmission, because transmission at the end of it all is a conveyance. It is not an originator. Responsibility is underscored, a responsibility on all the political players across the board, because what they are doing is litigating the rights of Kenyans, not their individual rights. My lords, given all that, would it be possible or would it be viable to challenge this outcome on the basis of infractions at municipal law level? We go to the infractions that have been advanced before you. My lords, one of my learned colleagues for the petitioners took a lot of your time going through the affidavit of Dr. Oduo, in which a multitude, a whole litany of grievances are set out. Those grievances can be described or categorized into two groups. Group number one, contentions that for his candidate or for the petitioner, at one point he had 10 votes, but what was posted is 8, so a deduction of 2 votes. And for the third respondent who had 10 votes, he is increased to 1 vote, and then it becomes 11 votes instead of 10. And he took that, a whole region, and very, very many paragraphs. The next category is the non-numerical category. The category where forms, he says, are not clear, or they are not signed by agents, or the forms are so faint you can't make anything about them. My lords, those are the complaints which are the basis upon which a very exaggerated with respect a submission was made that the elections were shambolic, and being shambolic, they should be declared invalid so that a re-election can take place. My Lord Chief Justice, I do recall, asked the Council, what is the effect, what is the numerical effect of all those complaints? And there was loud silence. Let me now take the hint from that question and deal with the numerical effect of all those so-called irregularities. May I request the court clerk, if you could, is an annexure to Winnie Nguchu's affidavit, subheading alleged numerical discrepancies. Maybe other judges as well, if you have copies. Very well. It should appear the clerk had only 1. My lords, at page 1, what we did is to take all those allegations and anticipate the question, because that question must be raised. What is the effect of those numerical discrepancies? So, my Lord Chief Justice, starting with the first one so that I can indicate, we have dealt with the paragraph. Number 1, we have dealt with the paragraph where the allegation is. The allegation is, it is not indicated petitioner had 66 votes, yet in Form 34B, it's indicated 56. My Lords will recall the 66 and the 56. Then our response, false. Petitioner had 56 votes in Form 34A, same as 34B. Total tally is indicated. So, my lords, we have gone to the extent of saying where it is a false allegation. The allegation that the petitioner had 66 and then that was reduced to 54 is a false statement of fact. And then we have dealt with it all the way to the end, and at the end, because at the end of it all we ought to be looking at what numerical difference. My Lord, if you could turn to the last page, the petitioner is the third one, starting from the right, where you see 822 votes. From all the discrepancies, each one of them, all that the petitioner would receive is an additional 822 votes. From all the discrepancies, 822 votes. Analyzed allegation per allegation. Then the third respondent is the candidate with 974. Again, from all the discrepancies, the third respondent's vote tally would reduce by 974 votes. Is my Lord with me? Hence, my Lords, from all those so-called discrepancies, the end result is, and I use this word deliberately, insignificant. Totally insignificant. My Lords, in the fullness of time, you will see how many are false allegations and how many are true allegations. Where it is a true allegation, my Lord, we have tabulated it for the petitioner for the benefit of this court. We have done that which the petitioner had a duty to do, which is say these are the irregularities, but demonstrate numerically what do they read to. My Lord, we now go to the non-numerical discrepancies. We go to the non-numerical discrepancies. And against the non-numerical discrepancies, that goes hand in hand with a document, the bigger document, no, the big one, yeah. It goes hand in hand with this other document, analysis of alleged non-numerical discrepancies, because we had to give, to place before you the documents themselves. And let us start with the first one, my Lord, the one on regarding Form 34A is uploaded on number 2, first page, my Lord. No, the big, yes, because that's the summary. Yes, we go to number 2. In paragraph 139, the contention is Form 34A is uploaded in the Commission's portal are not clear or legible. Our response is false, untrue. The form attached are clear and legible. This is in Mombasa, Jomvu, Miritini, World Bank. Where do we get that document? We go to this bundle. Yes? Yeah, oh good. My Lord Chief Justice has it. And then the first page is about paragraph 139. write the first page, paragraph 139. And then, my Lord, we'll see the form 34A is attached to it. It is quite clear, it is quite legible, and more important, is signed by all the candidates' agents. My Lord has seen that. And then, if my Lord could bear with me, turn to the second one, still at paragraph 139, page 10, handwritten page 10, just to demonstrate the falsity of these claims. It is contended, it's not clear, but my Lord, at page 10, handwritten page 10, you see the document there is quite clear, as well as the next one is quite clear, yet the evidence before you is that those documents are not clear. Why have we gone to this extent, my lords? We have gone to this extent to demonstrate before you that all these allegations are untrue. They want to portray a picture of shambolic elections, whereas to the contrary, the elections were fairly credible. And despite having presented this evidence before you, it was quite shocking for my legal team to sit in court and listen to these accusations one after the other about 66 votes being reduced to 54, whereas we have presented all the evidence before the court and served our learned friends so that they could, so to speak, reflect, have a self-referential moment and see whether they want to advance that theory anymore. Self-referential is a movement that costs nothing. It only costs one his conscience and his moment of silence. My lords, why did I use the term insignificant? I used the term insignificant because of the results that were declared. The results that were declared were that the third respondent had 8.2 million votes out of the 15 point something million votes, and the petitioner had 6.8. The difference, quantitative difference, was 1.4 million votes, approximately. I say approximately because there will be a few thousands and a few hundreds. But let me deal with rounded figures because it will be easier. A difference of 1.4 million is significant. It is a difference that shows the will of the Kenyan electorate. And when one compares with the numerical differences which have been brought before you of 800 votes, then those numerical differences can only be said to be quite insignificant. That is not to say that we for one moment countenance even a single vote being taken from the first petitioner to the ballot of any other person. We do not. But we appreciate that is our fellow brothers and sisters who are doing this tallying process in very difficult circumstances. Circumstances which have received judicial recognition in our courts. Kenyans want the outcome immediately. The clerks have been working the entire night and the entire day. So errors of addition may arise. But it is an electoral contest. It's not surgery in theater. While liars, we have demonstrated that our worthy opponent vote tally 800 were deducted by error. What must be said, my lords, and I want to say it as humbly and as firmly as I can, that was not at the instance of the third respondent. He had nothing to gain from an extra 800 votes. He would not even countenance such an error, but we accept. As a matter of fact, if a similar exercise was carried out for the third respondent, and we have carried it out, we lost about 2,000 votes. Some posted to the candidate just next to us. A place where my client had 100 votes is posted to Wainaina. And Wainaina had 0 vote is posted to my client. And those things do happen. At the end of it all, my lords, one is looking at the greater good of the process instead of what is scientifically a scientific impossibility. My lords, I move to the next point, which is a complaint on rejected votes. I would wish to associate myself with the submissions made by Ahmed Nasir. Those rejected votes have been analyzed in a similar exercise as we have analyzed, and the analysis will be in the affidavit of Mr. Davis Shishil. The rejected votes at the last presidential election was approximately 81,000. It is our submissions that rejected votes cannot be taken into account in the final tally. It was a point that we argued in 2013. Nothing has changed since then to warrant a departure from the judgment that this honorable court made. Apart from the principle of stare decisis, there is a greater principle that in this electoral contest, which is nothing more than a political contest being now brought to court, that there should be a fair degree of predictability, a fair degree of uniformity in the judgments from the court, so that our political players do not all the time seek a departure from what has been decided previously. My lords, the next point I would wish to deal with is about polling stations without adequate coverage. The coverage was either 3G or 4G. My lords, prior to the polling date, Prior to the polling date, my lords, it is common ground that political parties were informed, and Kenyans too were informed, about 11,000 polling stations which did not have adequate 3G or 4G network. And they were informed that the results from those polling stations will not be streamed as instantaneously, or the images from those areas will not be streamed as instantaneously as the polling stations where there was adequate coverage. My lords, we must accept one thing, that these telecommunication players do go where there is good business for them. So in places where there isn't a lot of our brothers and sisters, they may not find it very lucrative to invest a lot of infrastructure. So there are indeed places in Kenya without 3G or 4G network. In those areas, my lords, it's not that the voters were disenfranchised. On the contrary, voting took place. The votes cast in those places are captured in the affidavit of David Shilshil, and in total 3.5 million voters were in those areas, and their votes have as much of value and weight as the votes in other regions. So, my lords, it cannot be, and it's not a legitimate argument to say that this election should be invalidated because of anything about the 11,000 polling stations. On the contrary, the voting on those areas took place, and the votes were taken into account as the votes from all other regions.
Were they finally transmitted?
All of them, without one vote being lost. And that is why, if I could elaborate a little, my Lord Chief Justice, we are in agreement that the polling stations in Kenya are 40,883. And even in the video by the late gentleman from IEBC, he refers to 40,800. We are in agreement. And the figure of 40,883 includes the 11,000. So it is not that this is a different segment from other polling stations. They are the same. And that is why repeated complaint becomes impossible to understand. Because since all these are polling stations with Form 34A, if there's a legitimate grievance, why not go to the primary document, look at the raw data in the original form, not even in a transmitted form, but original form, and go through all these 34As, do a national tally, and come up with a result. My lords, I go to the next point, which is ungazetted polling stations. The less I say about this, the better I believe. There was only one polling station that came into being pursuant to a judgment by the High Court, and the votes from voting did take place and the votes were included, and again, since it's a polling station, the votes do not in any way affect the difference, the quantitative difference between the two candidates. What I mean, my lord, is this is a polling station. The polling took place due to a High Court judgment. The decree is before you. The numbers that voted in that polling station are well indicated. The voters in that area had a constitutional right set by Article 38 to participate in the election of their candidates, and that cannot be a complaint adequate on its own to invalidate a national election. My lords, I have dealt with everything at a municipal law level, because one is dealing with transmission, one is dealing with tallying, complaints about 3G network and everything. My lords, all those do not come to the level of invalidating an election conducted in accordance with the Constitution, in our humble submission. I then move to the accusations against the third respondent. The first accusation against the third respondent is that he went to Makueni, threatened and intimidated chiefs so that they could all parade Kenyans in that area to vote for him. That allegation, my lords, has been dealt with incisively and decisively in an affidavit by Dr. Kebicho, who is the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Interior, in paragraphs 22 up to 25 of his affidavit. It is noteworthy, my lords, because this is an accusation against the third respondent, that Mr. Kebicho deposed, and it's not controverted, that he, Mr. Kebicho, received intelligence reports that certain chiefs were campaigning for candidates in that area. The names of those chiefs are deposed too in the affidavit. And they were campaigning for a political party, which is NASA. And he passed that communication or that intelligence to his appointing authority. And when the third respondent was in that area, he actually told all public officers in very general terms that none should campaign for anybody, and not even himself. And when politicians take to the microphone and say, look, people, let's engage, we'll be here, this country is larger than all of us, let's not do politics, that is not a threat. It is what is expected of people in public office. The results in that area, my lord, tell the truth. One could look at the antithesis of the hypothesis that was put